My name is John Passfield. I'm going to read from my Macbeth novel. This is video 6, Lady Macbeth, Imaginary Conversations. The novel is Lord and Lady Macbeth, Full of Scorpions is My Mind, a novel by John Passfield. And here's a summary from the back cover. Lord and Lady Macbeth are being stung, not by scorpions, but by imagery, the medium by which human beings think at the deepest levels, and the kingdom which they seek to conquer and control is not just Scotland, but the kingdom of the mind. Imagery enlightens, but it also obscures. Imagery is loyal, but it also betrays. Imagery is visible on the surface, but manifests itself at hidden depths. Their mutual struggle to live in prose while thinking in imagery affects the two Macbeths in different ways. Now, the structure of the novel is that there's two rotating major cycles. Macbeth's chapters, the thoughts of Macbeth, are chapters 1, 3, 5, and so on. Interlayered with those chapters are the thoughts of Lady Macbeth. Her chapters are 2, 4, 6, and so on. So in this video, I'm concentrating on Lady Macbeth. The most conscious thoughts of the main character, Lady Macbeth, are about the action of the Shakespeare play. Deeper down in her mind are many thoughts, one of which is a cycle of conversations. Now, the title of this video, Imaginary Conversations, is a poor one, but I couldn't think of a title which would be as complex as the imagery of the novel. In terms of the imagery of the novel, some of these people in the conversations are actual people in her life, and the conversations might well have taken place. However, some of these people are actual people, but the conversations could not have taken place at that time or in those settings. And thirdly, some of the people might not be actual people. And I'm thinking of the last image in this cycle of imagery, and so the conversation is presumably imaginary. Now, in any case, we can ask, why do our minds create images when our experience has none to offer? Think of our dreams and our nightmares, which supply imagery to our minds, imagery with which to think, which has no basis in our actual life experience. Why would the mind do this? What image need is there that memories of actual experience cannot supply? Also, why are these conversations so important to Lady Macbeth as significant images in a larger image pattern, as a means of exploring whatever problem she is attempting to solve? So, imagery as problem solving. We think in imagery in order to solve problems. There's one imaginary conversation per Lady Macbeth chapter. Each is embedded in imagery of the present moment and of the past. First of all, I'd like to mention, though, I write to form. So when I thought of having one image per chapter out of, say, 50 images, and the Lady Macbeth chapters be conversations, I wondered, well, what would parallel that in the Macbeth chapters? What one image among, say, 50 per chapter would Macbeth think about? And I decided that, well, he wouldn't have conversations. He's not the type. What he would do is puzzle out the witches. So I'll just read one. I'm just looking for page 5 here of Macbeth, and then we'll leave that aside. So he's not the kind to review conversations in his life. What he does is he's trying to puzzle, well, what is a witch? What power does a witch have? Are witches benevolent or detrimental? If they do have power over you and they're opposing you, can you outsmart them? Can you outwit them, and so on? Here's just one of his thoughts that are parallel to her conversations. What have I heard? What have I heard? Old foot soldiers, camp followers, round the campfires late at night. Howl of the wolves, cry of the crickets, light of the moon, whispering of what they have seen and heard to unsettle callow recruits, old, lame, poor, lean, deformed, showing melancholy in their faces, horrifying to all that discover them, able to raise some men high and bring others low? Why, what have I to do with campfire tales? So in his 9 chapters, there are 9 images of this puzzling out of what witches are. Let's leave that aside, though. We'll concentrate on Lady Macbeth. Chapter 2, page 14. This is during a chapter in which she's hearing about the witches for the first time. Here's the conversation she thinks of. Problem solving. My father and I, alone. I have found the one I shall marry, father, with your permission, of course. You must have seen him in the courtyard the day we arrived. The young man who rode the black charger. His name is Macbeth. I'm sure you've noticed him in the throne room, round the fire, and at the dance. He must have attended those parleys that you found so hard to bear. We went for a walk in a meadow. There were others present, of course. He is sure to be the next king, father. He outshines the feeble cousin of him. Of that I am sure. He was the one in the splendid armor. You remember the demonstration? The one who wielded the heaviest sword? The one who cut the contenders down like a sigh? Yes, that is the one. I know he will be the next king. He spoke of his dream to me. He has contempt for his cousin Duncan, though he was circumspect, of course. I agreed that he would make a perfect king. We are compatible to our depths, father. Much of our understanding was reached without words. We have agreed on so many things. He will speak to you, father, before we leave for home. So that conversation, presumably real, actual, comes back to her as a memory when she first hears about the witches. Let's go to page 29, which is chapter 4, Lady Macbeth 2. And during that chapter, Duncan is visiting the castle. And, oops, where did I find it here? Oh, here's the conversation that she has during that episode. Mother, I have some excellent news. The days of our humiliation are soon to be memories. My husband is going to be king. No more worrying about our fate now that old Malcolm is gone. Neither one of us trusts that shallow Duncan, but he will no longer be in our way. You remember, I'm sure, how difficult things were for you. Sending father on each of those parleys, I felt for you as you waited for him to come home. Fears of it all being swept away, at the mercy of the selfish and the proud, clinging to power at the whim of the one who wields the sword. You see our father and our husband so diminished, a little more tattered each time, a little more worn away. Let us ask the cook for some aprons. The flowers are blooming in the field. Let us go out and pick the flowers for the table today. My husband shall be king. His hand shall be on the tiller. I have no doubt that we too will succeed. We shall never be swept away by the wind and the tide. Well, that memory is an image that's being brought in, I guess, to illuminate this scene where Duncan arrives at the castle of Macbeth and his wife. Let's go to page 46. And this is a chapter in which Duncan dies. And here's the thought that is brought in somehow to illuminate those events, as images do. Images illuminate other images, for better or for worse, I suppose. 46. A cold day in the castle, huddling up to the fire, cloistered with Duncan's wife, a woman embraced by death, a sickly, wheezing little biddy. A newcomer would mistake her for the maid. Thank you, your majesty, for inviting me here to wait the arrival of my husband. Each time he ventures out, I am left alone. I see your husband is a warrior. Much is hazarded on this push. I trust my husband, and of course Banquet, will deliver the hoped-for rewards. Your husband shines in the parleys, my husband tells me. I assume young Malcolm will do so as well. And what of Donalbain? I wonder what he will become. My husband says that a kingdom is only as strong as its warriors are equal to the task of keeping it safe and secure and free. He is always pleased to present his victories to his king. You do not look well, your majesty. Press closer to the fire. Shall I call for an attendant? Mulled wine is good for the cold. The fates have smiled on you, your majesty. My husband has always wanted sons. Are your sons with their father? I assume that neither boy has gone into the field. Well, needling her a little bit, eh? A little sarcasm there, but bringing in that image somehow to illuminate the death of Duncan scene. And now the discovery of Duncan on page 62. The bulk of the chapter dealing with that event, of course, but this one image embedded in that chapter of thought in the mind of Lady Macbeth, page 62. A cold day at the gravesite. What will the boy do now? What a pity his mother is gone. Swept away at a shallow ford. A stumbling horse, and she was gone. Banquet was sure that she hit her head on one of the rocks. A boy without a mother? A father? Without a wife? Where's the justice? Banquet was probably the best of the men besides my husband. Macduff is a father to treasure, I'm sure, as well. None of the others would do to raise a son alone. The boy seems lost beside the gravesite. I almost feel like taking his hand. What is the matter with Duncan's wife? Could she not understand her role as the reigning queen? She is sniveling under a blanket and wiping her nose. My husband has always admired Banquo. We should bring him in on the plan. As long as he sees how his thread will add shade to the tapestry. The country needs a warrior king. Each call to parley makes us weaker. Scotland is slowly bleeding away. I'm sure that Banquo and Macduff will fall into line. Perhaps Banquo's son, young Fleance, this splendid boy, could follow my husband. Well, again, that's embedded in many other thoughts. I wonder what problem she's trying to solve and whether imagery like that is helping. Let's go to page 77 for another one of these conversations, whether imaginary or not. This chapter is preparation for the banquet where Macbeth and Lady Macbeth appear as the new king and queen. And here's what she thinks while that is taking place in her mind. It's all in her mind. Every word of every chapter is in Lady Macbeth's mind. A word with you, Lady Macduff, if I may make so bold. A word or two between us before you go. I sense that your husband is in a hurry. He seemed a little abrupt just now. No doubt he is anxious to ride post-haste to Scone. My husband is counting on his presence. They've been so compatible in the past. Their regard for each other will increase in the days to come. I have always admired your family. You're so lucky to have your children. They seem to be with you all the time. Your son resembles his father in every way. I grew up in a very close family. My father always wanted a son. I enjoyed overhearing your banter with your boy. Please tell the servant to say that you're occupied at the moment. Your husband will countenance, I'm sure, a slight delay. It is so pleasant here in the sunshine. What is a moment or two on such a splendid morning? I shall rely on you in the future. You will come to Scone, of course. I shall be ever so pleased to have a good chat at Scone. So maybe we're moving into territory where the validity of these images is less in question, although I don't know whether images have to be based on actuality to be valuable as aids to thinking. That's just something that one wonders as one reads such images and tries to sort of figure out what they're doing for or perhaps against the person who's thinking in images and trying, of course, to clarify thought. Here's page 94, and this is during the banquet itself. So an awful lot going on, like 50 images roughly in this chapter of the banquet scene as we know it from the play, Macbeth. And here's an image that's embedded in all those other images, just one image. Banquet's boy in the courtyard. The sun is a welcome respite from all that rain. Swinging a sword too big for him, but hefting it valiantly. Your father's sword, I presume. The day will come when it will seem no more than a dagger. Helping the servants to polish his armor too, I see. A wonderful thing for a son to do. He has fought beside my husband many times. Your age at present, my son, if you don't mind the asking. A boy like you must make his father proud. You'll be riding out with your father soon, I would wager. You'll soon have a sword and armor of your own. Very pleasant here in the sunshine. Oh, please don't rush away. I'm sure that your father is not in a hurry. I like to watch you as you work. I don't often get to talk to a boy of your age. I observe that you and your father are very close. Well, I'll just leave that at that, I guess. Let's go to 109. Um, Here it is, yeah. And this is in a chapter in which I had a problem, but I solved it. She was not at the castle when Lady Macduff and her family were slaughtered. Lady Macbeth wasn't. So I set up a chapter in which she's there in two ways. She's there in her imagination as a representative of the Macbeth murder machine, Lady and Lord Macbeth, who are murdering all these people in the kingdom. She's there to oversee the murder and make sure it's done well. After all, if she and Macbeth are one as two, two as one, as she says elsewhere in the novel, then Lady Macduff is being slaughtered by the Macbeths, plural. So she's there as the overseer. She's also there, this is in her mind, this is imagery, as Lady Macduff, the lady who is being slaughtered by the Macbeths. So Lady Macbeth being slaughtered by the Macbeths, in a sense, and in the sense that imagery suggests things. So here's what she thinks during that in terms of a conversation. Lady Macduff's young son, in the throne room before the coronation. Hello, young boy, do not be frightened. You are the son of Lady Macduff. I remember you well. You were the boy who brought the cage with the fine plumed birds. I saw you ride beneath our battlements as you arrived. I see your little kitten has run away. You get on one side of the throne, and I will place myself on the other. Together we will catch the little scamp. Oh, I see it covets the throne. Not alone in that regard, I'm bound to say. Where are your mother and your father? Last minute readiness, no doubt. I've been dressed for it seems like hours. My husband is nowhere to be found. How its little heart is beating. Does your kitten have a name? Please stay a little longer. Surely your parents won't begrudge. They will blow the trumpets long before the start. Well, this is a scene which doesn't seem to have actually taken place if you know the play and look at some of the details of this scene, this image scene. But again, if thinking in imagery is problem solving, then how well is Lady Macbeth doing in problem solving, and what problem is she trying to solve? Let's go to 125, which is the last chapter of Lady Macbeth's thoughts in the novel, and therefore this will be the last conversation. In this chapter, she is sleepwalking, as she is in the Shakespeare play. And so again, about 50 images in that chapter, many, many thoughts going through her mind as images. But here's the conversation. A babe like no other. I love to hold you at my breast, a son to please his father, growing up by leaps and bounds, a warrior's form already. My back is sore from carrying you around. Your father sleeps like a baby since you've been born, a load off weary shoulders. The succession is now assured. I've hardly slept a wink since my laying in. No, I've not. A lot you care as long as you have your accustomed milk. You're drinking me, you snug little fellow, drinking me and all that I am. Too precious to pass you on to the nursing maids. You shall be your mother's child as well as your father's. You shall be the best of your father and mother both. Take your time. I can stay up all night. Drink as deep as your father drinks. We must nurse you into manhood, a stately princeling of the realm. Some day, my boy, you shall wear your father's crown. So that in the scene where she's sleepwalking. So again, what force does this image represent? All imagery attempts to be significant imagery in the mind of a character, in the mind of everybody, of a person. Characters in novels, characters in plays are not different from you and I. They're the same as you and I in terms of the way the mind thinks, the way the mind operates. And so that's what I'm getting here in my version of the Shakespearean story of Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. In a minute, a few more. So that's the conversation minor cycle for Lady Macbeth. But here's a couple more images in that last chapter of thought by Lady Macbeth in a different image mode. Here's one. I'm standing on the battlements. The ceremony goes on, the passing of deference and allegiance from man to hand. My child is a blood-stained bundle. He lies in the courtyard for all to see, but no one acknowledges him. Blood is seeping from his wrappings. The bloody stain spreads far and wide. The parley of rights and duties continues on. And then in that same cycle, which is a nightmare cycle, I'm standing on the parapet. I grasp the stones with my toes. I launch myself into the air above the crowd. I float above the bustling courtyard. I float above my blood-soaked babe. I float above the conquerors and the conquered. The sunlight gleams on their blood-soaked armor. I cannot tell which is which from this great height. If I let myself fall from the air, I shall dash my brains out. So we have images in the final chapter of her nursing this babe who's going to be the next king. We also have images of this babe as a blood-stained bundle far below in the courtyard. Well, prose novels are written in prose. They're novels of statement. They tell you what they mean. Poetic novels are written in imagery. They present a series of images in patterns, and that's a little deeper down in the levels at which we think, but that's what a poetic novel does. It takes you a little down deeper into the mind of the character and says, well, here are the images by which Lady Macbeth is thinking, but it doesn't tell you what she's thinking. And that's the challenge of reading a poetic novel, but it's also the enjoyment if you like poetry, if you like imagery, if you prefer poetic novels to prose novels. Prose novels simply tell you, and that's that. Here's a passage from one of my notes, and I'll tell you how to access those notes for free in a moment. It was a revelation in the early 20th century to realize that there was a place where the earth was being both created and destroyed. It was at the deepest level of the ocean. Imagery works in our minds in the same way. We take in imagery in various shapes, from well-reasoned theses to fragments of ideas, from sounds and conversations, from television and advertisements, and we break them down into fragments and then rebuild them in various levels of fragments and wholes, of coherence and complexity, by forming images, image arcs, and image patterns. So poetic play is an image pattern, a poetic novel is an image pattern, all of which are charged with the task of evaluating one another in a comparison and contrast mode, in an attempt to reach an understanding of our lives here on Earth and in the universe, here at this moment, and in historical and cosmic time. We produce imagery on many levels of complexity, from the simplistic slogans of pamphleteering to thoughts whose complexities of idea are embodied in the works of our artists, with King Lear by Shakespeare and the Ninth Symphony of Beethoven being two of the supreme examples of that complexity, the highest level of complexity of thought at which the human mind is capable of thinking. So Shakespeare thought in imagery, Beethoven thought in imagery. That's how they expressed their view of life. That's how they responded to the lives that they were living. Well, here's the cover again. Lord and Lady Macbeth Full of Scorpions is My Mind, a novel by John Passfield. It's available on Amazon. It's also available at my publishers, rocksmillspress.com, rocksmillspress.com, and there's more information there. If you go to my website, johnpassfield.ca, johnpassfield.ca. There's more information in the form of 2 books. A notebook, which I wrote while I was planning, structuring, and writing this novel, and a journal which I wrote as I was polishing the novel, a journal of response to the novel on many, many topics. So if you just go to that website, johnpassfield.ca, click on notebooks or click on journals and go down to the Macbeth icon, those books are yours for free. Lastly, I'd like to say thank you for watching this video.